Have you ever felt as if something or someone intervened just seconds before everything could have gone wrong? As if life, in its infinite chaos, suddenly aligned in your favor without explanation? What if I told you that the events you've called coincidence were never random, but messages in disguise, signs of a deeper order watching you silently, relentlessly, without asking for praise or belief? You dismiss the chill on your spine, the whisper in a dream, the stranger's words that echoed exactly what you needed to hear. But what if these weren't accidents? What if the unseen is far more organized than the visible? There is a kind of protection that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't flash with miracles or shout from the heavens. It acts in silence, subtle, deliberate, precise. And yet you've felt it. In moments when the world should have shattered you, something held you, not by force but by meaning. Protection doesn't always save you from pain. Sometimes it lets you fall just enough to learn but not enough to break. What you call suffering may have been mercy in disguise, and what you call luck may have been the shadow of something sacred guarding your path. But the modern world has taught you to ignore such things, to worship logic and dismiss anything that doesn't bleed numbers or fit into formulas. It has silenced the language of dreams and buried the archetypes that once whispered to our ancestors. You've been taught to mistrust the invisible. Yet here you are, drawn to a question you can't quite explain. Why? Because something inside you remembers, not with words, but with feeling, with symbols, with the quiet certainty that something has always been there. Just beyond the veil of your awareness. Carl Jung once said that what you most need to find will be found where you least want to look. So what if this video is not here to entertain you, but to awaken a truth you've buried, a truth so profound that your entire life will rearrange around it the moment you allow it in? These 7 signs are not information. They are recognition, mirrors to your unconscious, patterns that have always followed you, but which only now demand to be seen. Not everyone will understand. Most will scroll. But those who stay will remember. And here is your warning. Once you hear them, you won't be able to unhear them. Once you see them, your life will never feel accidental again. The question is not whether you are being protected. The question is, by what and why? Now, what is it that this force, whatever name you dare to give it, sees in you that you have not yet seen in yourself? They often ask me, how do I know if I am protected? And I never answer with certainty, because truth, when it is real, does not come with clarity. It comes wrapped in paradox. The first sign is not a sign at all. It is a feeling, a trembling, beneath your skin when nothing visible has changed. It is the quiet before something happens, and yet in that silence, something has already shifted. Protection rarely announces itself. It does not raise banners or thunder from the skies. It whispers in the form of absence, the car that didn't hit you, the call you didn't make, the night you chose not to walk down that road. It is what didn't happen that reveals the most. And yet, how do you notice something that never occurred? That is the dilemma. The unseen asks for inner vision. It requires a different kind of eye, the one that stares inward, not outward. But modern man is blind to the invisible. He only trusts what he can measure, touch, dissect. He has built entire systems to drown intuition, to silence the voice of the archetype whispering beneath his rational mind. So when protection comes, not with fire but with restraint, he calls it coincidence. He shrugs, he scrolls, but the psyche remembers. Even when the ego forgets, the soul knows when it has been spared. It carries a tension, a mark like the echo of a dream you can't recall, but that shapes your entire day. The first sign, therefore, is the discomfort of safety, that eerie calm that comes not from control, but from surrender. A moment when you feel chosen, but cannot explain why. When the chaos brushes past you and you are left standing, whole, intact, confused. And if you dismiss this as luck, you kill the symbol before it blooms. There are those who walk through life wrapped in a strange kind of grace, not because they are better, not because they pray harder, but because something in them is still listening. A deeper self, what I call the self with a capital S, has not been severed by culture, by trauma, by the machinery of progress. And this self knows when the path bends in your favor. It knows that what you call delay might be a shield, that what you name rejection might be a redirection, that the heartbreak you could not endure was perhaps the very thing that returned you to yourself. Protection is not always kindness. It can arrive as loneliness, as illness, as isolation, because the soul does not seek comfort, it seeks wholeness, and wholeness often requires shattering. Have you ever looked back at a tragedy and felt a strange gratitude that you didn't dare speak aloud? A pain that refined you, a detour that saved you, a collapse that stripped away everything false, leaving only what could not be taken. That is not random. That is orchestration. You see, the psyche has its own timing, and the self, this deep organizing principle within you, conspires to bring you into alignment with it, but it does not do so gently. The greater the protection, the more subtle its shape. It does not guard your ego's path, it protects your essence. And that often means sabotaging the life you thought you wanted. How terrifying, isn't it, to realize that you might be protected from yourself, from your delusions, from the persona you built to please the world. The first sign of protection is the collapse of everything that is not truly you. And if you are still listening, if something in your chest feels unsettled, good. That means you're close. Close to seeing what your rational mind cannot grasp, that every silence, every absence, every door that refused to open may have been an act of love so fierce it chose invisibility over applause. You want proof, but I will not give you proof. I will give you a mirror. Look at your life. Look at what didn't happen. Look at the pain that pushed you inward. Look at the uncanny timing. Look at the patterns that keep saving you when you think you're falling. Look not with your eyes, but with the part of you that dreams, that bleeds, that breaks. The part of you that has been quietly protected all along, even from the truth you weren't ready to see. The second sign is paradoxically the most painful one. It is the moment when your world begins to fall apart, not through catastrophe, but through the slow erosion of meaning. It begins as a subtle nausea toward the life you once fought to build. The career that once validated you now tastes of ash. The relationships that once lit you up begin to dim without reason. Your reflection becomes unfamiliar. This is not depression. This is not failure. This is a calling. But calling rarely comes in the form of a voice. It comes in the form of collapse, the unraveling of what is no longer aligned with the truth of your being. When a higher power protects you, it first removes everything that is not truly yours, and it does so ruthlessly. This is why most people confuse divine protection with punishment, because they don't realize they are not being destroyed, they are being emptied. You may resist. You will resist, because the ego clings to what it knows, even if what it knows is killing it. You will call it a mistake. You will grieve what is leaving you. And yet, beneath the mourning, something ancient will begin to stir. A knowing that has no words. A remembrance not of something you learned, but something you are. The soul cannot speak in sentences. It speaks in symbols, sensations, synchronicities. And when you are being protected, these symbols will begin to multiply. Dreams will become vivid. Encounters will feel scripted. The same message will echo through different mouths, different books, different coincidences. It will become harder to ignore. That is the second sign. Synchronicity so precise, so frequent, so emotionally resonant that it cannot be dismissed unless you are determined to remain asleep. But here lies the great danger. The second sign requires courage. Because synchronicity is not decoration, it is instruction. It is the self attempting to course correct you, but the message will always be indirect. It is not a GPS, it is a compass. You must interpret. You must feel your way forward, and most will not. They will return to the comfort of certainty. They will seek logic where logic does not belong. They will kill the symbol with analysis. But for those who dare to follow the thread, no matter how faint, how irrational, protection begins to take form. Not as avoidance of pain, but as alignment with depth. The protection is not from the world. It is from shallowness, from falsehood, from mediocrity of spirit. And that is why it hurts. The fire you are walking through is not hell. It is initiation. And what is being initiated exactly? Your memory. Not the memory of events, but the memory of essence. The self is not something you become, it is something you remember, and protection is the scaffolding that holds you as the forgetting burns away. But it feels like betrayal. It feels like abandonment. It feels like divine indifference because the mind still believes that protection should feel like comfort. But comfort is the reward of the persona. The self craves truth, and truth annihilates comfort. So when you see everything you've built begin to rot, do not flee. That decay may be your resurrection. That silence may be the first sound of a language you have not yet learned to speak. A sacred dialect carved in symbol, in shadow, in suffering, but holy nonetheless. If you're listening to this, chances are you've already tasted this disintegration. You've sat in a room that once held your joy and felt it echo back emptiness. You've touched the face of someone you loved and felt the coldness of something finished. You've stared at your own reflection and whispered, "Who am I now?" And in that whisper, you were not alone. That was not despair. That was the self waking up. The protection is not found in the rebuilding of what was lost. It is found in the surrender to what is becoming. It is found in your refusal to go back to sleep, in your willingness to follow the thread of meaning, no matter how subtle, no matter how terrifying. Because somewhere in this web of loss there is a pattern, and if you trace it back far enough, you will see it leads to you. Not the you perform, but the one that has always been watching, waiting, whispering. This is not something you can prove. This is not something you can teach. It is something you feel in your skin, in your bones, in the electric silence between your thoughts. The second sign is that everything begins to speak, but only if you have the courage to listen. Not with your ears, but with the part of you that bleeds when no one is looking. The part of you that knows what it means to burn without being consumed. You are not losing your mind. You are regaining your soul. And the protection that surrounds you is not a shield. It is a storm that removes what can no longer hide who you are becoming. The third sign is the return of the forgotten, not in the way you might expect, not with clarity, not with the clean edges of memory, but with the weight of something unresolved, something ancient, pressing against the back of your awareness. It comes through flashes, through aches you cannot name, through the sudden heaviness of places and people that once seemed light. When a higher power is guiding you, it does not erase your past, it resurrects it. Not to torment, but to reintegrate. What you thought you had buried was never dead. It was simply waiting for the moment you would be strong enough to face it. Protection, you see, is not avoidance. It is confrontation, the kind of confrontation that makes healing possible. And this healing does not come gently. It is raw. It is wild. It does not ask for your permission. It appears in your dreams as symbols you can't decipher. It moves through your relationships like a mirror, forcing you to see your own shadows projected onto others. It takes the shape of old wounds reopening not to bleed, but to breathe. The third sign is the unraveling of your emotional amnesia, a sacred disorientation that pulls the suppressed to the surface. The self knows what you need to see before you can be whole. And sometimes that means reliving the very pain that first fractured you. But this time you are not alone. This time you are being held not by a person but by presence, a presence that feels eternal and impossible and quietly undeniable. You will try to explain it away. You will call it nostalgia, trauma, hormones. You will dismiss the messages as random, as too strange to mean anything real. But the unconscious does not speak in logic. It speaks in pattern, in symbol, in circular loops that defy the straight line of reason. When you are being protected, the unconscious becomes louder, not to overwhelm but to guide. And it will guide through discomfort, through déjà vu, through the uncanny. You'll find yourself drawn to the same types of people, the same dynamics, the same repeating emotional spirals. Not because you are broken, but because something in you longs to break through. That is the signal, repetition with intensity. Not punishment, but portal, an invisible invitation to finally complete the unfinished. There is no protection more sacred than the one that brings you back to the place you tried to escape, and hands you the tools you didn't have the first time. The people who reappear in your life now are not the same, and neither are you. This time your hands do not tremble when you speak. This time your boundaries are not built from fear, but from truth. This time you do not seek to be understood, you seek to understand. And that shift, subtle as it may seem, is the mark of transformation. It is the proof that the protection is working from the inside out. You are no longer fighting to be safe. You are learning how to carry safety within you. But do not be deceived. This stage is not peaceful, it is not romantic. It is psychological fire. Your moods may swing, your identity may fracture. You will question your sanity. And in that questioning, something pure will emerge. The ability to witness yourself, not judge, not fix, just witness. And when you begin to witness without needing to control, without needing to explain, you are beginning to embody protection itself. The protector is no longer external. It is not a deity in the clouds or a force beyond the stars. It is your own integrated self, rising from the fragments, gluing them not back into their original form, but into something more real, more you. You may find yourself speaking words you've never said before, acting in ways that feel foreign yet true. You may walk away from situations that once held you captive, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And you won't know where this clarity is coming from. It will feel as if something ancient has taken residence inside you, something both fierce and tender, both silent and unrelenting. That is not madness. That is not ego. That is memory. Soul memory. The third sign is the moment your soul begins to remember its own language and uses your body, your voice, your choices as the medium through which it speaks. You don't need to understand it all right now. You don't need to find the words. You only need to trust the tremor in your chest, the tears that come without warning, the sudden knowing that breaks through your confusion like light through a crack. These are not symptoms. They are signs. They are proof that the protector is within, not as an idea, but as a force that has waited patiently for your readiness. And if you've made it this far, if you're still listening, then I will tell you something I rarely say. You are ready, not to be saved, but to meet the one who has been saving you all along. The fourth sign is silence, but not the kind that soothes. No, this silence is thick. It presses against the walls of your chest like a question with no mouth, a scream that never exits your throat. It arrives when you least expect it. After the noise, after the grief, after the answers you once clung to dissolve, it comes not to comfort, but to hollow you. And in that hollowing, something begins to echo. That is when you know you are being protected, when life no longer gives you what you want, but gives you the space to hear what you need. Most people fear the silence because it reveals not what is out there, but what is in here. And here, inside, is where all the unspoken truths live, the truths you were taught to avoid, the truths that were too dangerous to touch when you were young, too painful to name, too foreign to claim as yours. But the self does not forget. And when it moves to protect you, it withdraws the distractions. It pulls the world back like a curtain, not to leave you empty, but to invite you into the place where your soul has been waiting, untouched, unnoticed, unheard. This silence is not absence. It is invitation, an initiation into the mystery of what it means to be whole. You may try to fill the void with people, with plans, with purpose. You may chase new paths, new identities, new philosophies, but the silence will follow. It is patient. It will not fight you, it will wait. And eventually, if you let it, it will begin to speak, in feelings, in intuitions, in the unbearable beauty of ordinary things, in the way a shadow falls across a room and makes you cry without knowing why, in the way a line from a book burns through your defenses, in the way your breath suddenly feels like prayer. That is not madness, that is not weakness, that is contact. You are touching something beyond form, something that has always been watching, always been guiding, always been protecting. The fourth sign is not something that can be proven to others. It is something only you can feel, and even then only in the stillness. It is the invisible thread that weaves through your losses and your joys, your questions and your failures, and shows you, not with words, but with presence, that none of it was wasted, that every heartbreak was a doorway, that every delay was an alignment, that every ending was the preparation for a beginning far more sacred than the one you prayed for. And yet, even knowing this, you will resist the silence, because it demands your truth. It strips the falsehoods. It takes the mask from your face and hands you a mirror made of your own sorrow and asks you to look. And when you do look, something extraordinary happens. You don't collapse, you don't vanish, you expand. You begin to see yourself not as a problem to be fixed, but as a mystery to be revealed. You begin to see your wounds not as curses, but as maps, sacred cartography, etched into your being, showing you the places where the divine touched you through pain. You realize the silence was never empty. It was full of everything you were too distracted to feel. And in that realization, something ancient stirs. The protector, the one who has been walking beside you in every moment you thought you were alone, the one who remained when everyone else left, the one who said nothing because they were waiting for you to speak. And now you do, not with noise, not with certainty, but with presence. You begin to live differently. You begin to walk slower, breathe deeper. You begin to trust what you cannot explain. You stop needing to convince. You stop needing to be seen. You realize that being protected does not mean being untouched. It means being accompanied. It means that in your darkest moments, something held the flame for you. And now that flame is inside you. You carry it in your eyes, in your gestures, in the way you forgive, in the way you see others. That is the true protection, not safety from life, but intimacy with it. A willingness to be broken open and still remain soft. The world will not understand this version of you. You will become quieter yet more intense, softer yet stronger. You will confuse those who knew the version of you that hid behind performance. And that too is a sign. When you no longer belong to what once defined you, it is because you now belong to something higher, something real, something sacred. The fourth sign is the silence that breaks you and reveals that what was breaking was never you. It was the illusion, and what remains is untouchable. The fifth sign is loss of control. And the paradox is that this too is grace in disguise, not a punishment, not a flaw, but a sacred disruption designed to bring the ego to its knees. You've been taught that power means mastery, that to be safe you must be certain, that to survive you must always be 10 steps ahead. But this belief is the illusion. The protector, when it intervenes, does not always come bearing comfort. It comes like an earthquake to the architecture of your false stability, and in that trembling, something vital begins to emerge. The awareness that your grip was never real. That control is not a virtue, but a cage. When you are being protected, life begins to unmake your certainties, plans unravel, systems collapse, the timelines you fought to uphold begin to decay. You watch your expectations dissolve like mist, and in their place a silent space, the terrifying unknown. This is the kind of protection that few recognize, because it feels like failure. But it is the opposite. It is redirection from the version of life that would have kept you numb, small, automated. When control dies, consciousness is born. This is the moment the self begins to live through you. Not your desires, not your narratives, but something much deeper. The movement of your true nature beneath all scripts. And the truth is, the self has never been interested in your performance. It cares nothing for what the world applauds. It is not invested in your image, your comfort, or your trophies. It cares only for your becoming. And becoming by nature requires undoing. The more tightly you cling, the more violently life will pry your fingers loose, but only because it is trying to save what is real inside you from being suffocated by what is not. So when everything begins to fall apart, not once but repeatedly, rhythmically, do not panic. That may be the precise moment you are finally being led, not by your fears but by something higher. You may ask, how can loss be protection? And I will ask, how else would the soul be able to speak if the noise of your control never stopped? There are truths that can only emerge in the absence of structure, in the space where you no longer know who you are. That disorientation is sacred, that emptiness is fertile. It is the soil where authenticity finally has room to grow. But it hurts. Of course it hurts. The ego was never designed to let go without a fight. It will scream, it will blame, it will beg for stability. But the deeper part of you, the witness, the self, will watch with calm recognition, knowing that the storm is not punishment. It is liberation. There is a quiet moment that arrives after the panic fades, when you are left with nothing but your breath. And in that moment, if you listen closely, something shifts. You begin to feel not lost, but raw. Not broken, but uncovered. You begin to sense that beneath all your effort, life has always had its own rhythm, and now you are finally beginning to hear it. The beat of something ancient, something beyond identity, pulsing through your body like a second heartbeat. That is not fear. That is presence. That is the fifth sign. Not the absence of chaos, but the birth of surrender. From here, you will move differently. You will stop clinging to what cannot stay. You will stop trying to architect every outcome. You will begin to listen, deeply, instinctively, not to your thoughts, but to the space beneath them. You will walk into uncertainty not as a victim, but as a vessel. And the world around you will begin to respond. Doors that refuse to open will now creak under the weight of your alignment. People who once drained you will quietly disappear. Synchronicities will return not as anomalies, but as companions. You will no longer chase, you will attract. Not because you are manifesting, but because you are finally in rhythm with what is already yours. And perhaps this is the most subversive form of protection. Not safety from harm, but safety from your false self. The part of you that needed to control everything. The part that believed it had to earn worthiness through achievement, obedience, or perfection. That part is dying now. Let it die. Let it burn. Because beneath the ashes, something holy is breathing. Something wild, something whole. And it will not lead you the way you expect, but it will never leave you. You have not lost control. You have lost illusion. And what remains now is a path that can only be walked with the bare feet of your soul, blistered, trembling, alive. The sixth sign is exile, but not from a place, from a former version of yourself, from a way of seeing the world that no longer fits the shape your soul is becoming. It does not announce itself. It creeps in quietly, through the subtle ache of disconnection. You wake up one day and realize you no longer belong where you once felt safe. The conversations bore you. The roles no longer fit. The laughter around you echoes but does not enter. It is not that the world has changed, it is that you have. And the protector, sensing your readiness, removes the veil that allowed you to pretend. Suddenly you are alone, not in presence but in perception. And that isolation is not punishment, it is passage. You were not made to belong to what numbs you. And so when protection takes hold in this form, it cuts the invisible cords that kept you entangled. You may try to stitch them back together, out of habit, out of fear, but something within you resists, not because it is cruel, but because it is loyal to the truth you can no longer unsee. The sixth sign is sacred exile, a withdrawal not enforced from without, but chosen from within. And it feels like grief. It feels like watching your reflection vanish from the mirrors you once used to define yourself. But this grief is not sterile, it is fertile. It prepares the ground for a new self to root and rise. This is the desert of becoming, a space where you are stripped of distraction, affirmation, identity, a space where the noise of belonging falls away, and you are left with nothing but the sound of your own soul breathing. And in that breath, you begin to hear things you had forgotten. The hum of intuition, the music of dreams, the language of symbol. You begin to walk through the world differently, not louder, but deeper, not faster, but fuller. You touch fewer things, but with more reverence. You speak fewer words, but with more weight. You listen not just to respond, but to feel the silence between the lines. Many will not understand this version of you. They will ask, what happened? Why did you change? And you will have no words that satisfy. Because you are not changing, you are revealing. The mask is dissolving. The script is burning. And what is left is not a new identity, but the ancient, Wantion, the one you wore before the world told you who to be. This is the protection at its most intimate, a return to the soul's original posture, not crafted, not performed, but naked and true. But here lies the danger, the temptation to return to the noise. The loneliness will sting, the absence will tempt, and the world will offer you comfort in exchange for your forgetting. It will whisper, "Come back, be who you were, be what we need you to be." But that voice, seductive as it may be, is the voice of sleep, and you have already begun to wake. Do not betray that awakening for the illusion of belonging, because those who cannot sit in their own silence will never meet themselves, and those who never meet themselves cannot recognize the protection that is shaping them. So, what do you do in the exile? You listen, you rest, you stop running, you stop performing, you let the stillness speak, and slowly something begins to emerge. A new frequency. People you've never met begin to feel like home. Ideas you once dismissed now pulse with life. You realize that exile was never about being cut off. It was about being retuned. You were not removed from connection. You were prepared for sacred connection, the kind that does not demand performance, that does not dilute your essence, that recognizes the fire in your eyes and says, "I see you." And when those connections arrive, because they will, you will recognize them not by their words but by their energy. They will not flatter your mask. They will call forth your soul. They will not fill your silence. They will sit inside it with you. And suddenly, you will remember why you had to walk alone, why the desert was necessary, why the shedding was sacred, because now you are no longer seeking a place to belong. You are the place, and those meant for you will find you there, not in the noise, not in the crowd, but in the frequency of truth that now radiates from your being. That is the sixth sign. You no longer fit, because you are no longer a fiction. You are a symbol, a vessel, a bridge between what you were and what you are becoming. And though the world may not know what to do with you, the protector does. It has not abandoned you. It has relocated you, not away from connection, but into the heart of it, a connection built not on survival but on soul. The seventh sign is peace that makes no sense, a stillness that rises from within you at the very moment everything outside seems to be falling apart. It does not come from answers, solutions, or certainty. It does not come because the pain is over. It comes in the middle of the storm when you should be breaking, and yet somehow you are not. It arrives like a presence, like breath, like a hush within the soul that says, "Even this is held." You don't know how you know, and you cannot explain it, but there it is, the calm beneath the chaos. That is the final sign, the sacred irrational peace that follows no rule but resonates like a memory from a place you've never been, but always belonged to. This peace does not announce itself with fanfare. It creeps in between the cracks, in the moment you stop fighting, in the moment you stop needing to understand. It does not eliminate your pain, it surrounds it. Like water around stone, like sky around mountain. It lets the ache exist but renders it softer, less sharp, less defining. Suddenly, the pain is still there, but it is no longer in charge. Something older has taken the helm, something that knows where you're going, even when you don't. This is the deepest form of protection, not a life without suffering, but a life where suffering no longer separates you from meaning, and meaning here is not a sentence you can recite. It is a sensation that moves through the body like truth. It changes how you breathe, how you touch, how you look at yourself in the mirror. You begin to realize that peace was never the absence of problems, it was the presence of alignment. The moment your inner world stops running away from what is, the moment your resistance melts and reveals the raw face of what's underneath, acceptance, not as surrender to defeat, but as reunion with what is already sacred. This peace is not accessible through effort. You cannot will yourself into it. You cannot manufacture it. It is what remains after you have let go of every illusion that was keeping you separate from yourself. And now that the masks are gone, now that the performances have collapsed, now that the exile has ended, what's left is the quiet recognition that you are okay. Even if you don't know what happens next, even if the questions are still unanswered, even if you still grieve. Somehow, through it all, something in you says, I trust. Not the world, not the people, not the story, but the source. And perhaps that is the true face of the protector, not a being above, but a foundation below. A base so steady it doesn't tremble when the structure above begins to shake. You walk differently now, not because the path has changed, but because the walker has. You are no longer seeking peace as a goal. You are recognizing it as a birthright, a state of being that lives in the marrow of your soul and that only needed stillness to be remembered. In this final stage, the protection is no longer something given to you. It is something you become. You become the safe space for others, for the child inside you, for every version of yourself that once trembled in the dark, waiting for someone to come. And now, you are the one who comes. You sit beside the pain. You breathe through the fear. You hold the silence without needing to fill it. You become the voice that says, I've got you, not from ego, but from essence. That is the alchemy. That is the transmutation. That is what all the unraveling was for. There is no way to fake this peace, no shortcut, no script. It is earned through descent, through burning, through the long walk through your own shadow without turning away. And when you finally arrive at the center, you find not answers but presence, not certainty but wholeness. And with it comes the unshakable awareness that nothing can take this from you, because it was never given by the world. It was uncovered in you. The seventh sign is this. You do not seek the divine, you realize you have always been carrying it. You were never meant to be kept safe. You were meant to be made whole, and wholeness, unlike safety, does not guard you from pain. It baptizes you in it. It carries you through it like a current carved by something ancient, something that knows exactly where to take you when your own maps catch fire. You did not arrive here by chance. You were brought, carried, summoned by a pattern older than memory, the silent mathematics of the soul. And now, as you stand at the edge of all you've known, you feel it, the shiver of something that has no name but every meaning. Look back for a moment, not to cling, but to see. Trace the echoes of what brought you here, the missed trains, the unbearable losses, the words that came at the exact moment your heart was collapsing. None of it was random. Every shadow held a thread. Every silence bore a seed. You mistook survival for abandonment. You mistook interruption for injustice. But now you begin to see that there was an orchestration beneath the disorder, a protection that did not shout, but shaped. It shaped your path with gentle destruction, with merciful endings, with doors that refused to open because they would have led you away from yourself. And now you know. The protector was never outside of you. It was the self, veiled, patient, watching, not interfering but intervening at the exact point where you might have fallen beyond return. And each time it did not spare you from pain. It let you feel just enough to awaken, to peel the layers of persona, to crack the casing of who you thought you had to be. Protection did not shield you. It invited you to shed, until all that remained was the truth of your essence. And in that truth, you were not rescued, you remembered. Perhaps now you see why it had to hurt, why the silence stretched so wide, why the losses felt so personal, because they were surgical, tailored, sacred. You were not being punished, you were being prepared, ready to become the very thing you kept looking for. You wanted signs, you became one. You wanted proof, you became presence. You wanted a savior. You became sanctuary. And there in the middle of the fire you thought would consume you, you became the flame itself. And now the world around you feels different, not because it changed, but because you are no longer filtering it through the eyes of fear. You are no longer walking with your hands clenched in control. You are no longer chasing meaning. You are embodying it. This is not peace, because life has finally given you what you want. This is peace because you have stopped resisting what life was always trying to give. The moments, the mirrors, the invitations. You have stopped asking for escape. You have started listening for alignment. So what will you do now with this knowing? Will you return to sleep pretending this was just a beautiful string of words? Or will you carry it, like a fire cupped in your palms, into your ordinary days? Will you remember in the next silence that you are not abandoned? Will you remember in the next storm that surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom? And in your remembering, will you speak softer? Will you love deeper? Will you begin to look into the eyes of others and see not strangers, but symbols, fragments of the same protector, learning to speak through different faces? Let this be your seed. You were never being tested. You were being trusted, trusted to lose, trusted to break, trusted to wake up, trusted to rise. And now you are not here to be saved. You are here to become a vessel of the very presence that once held you in the dark. You carry that torch now. It burns quietly, but it never dies. Let it light others. Let it illuminate the forgotten. Let it remind those still wondering that there is a path, and they are already on it. And if this has stirred something in you, not a thought, but a memory without origin, then stay close. Not to me, not to these words, but to yourself. To the self that's been calling you through every echo, every loop, every impossible coincidence. Let's not call this the end. Let's call this the moment you stopped waiting for the signs and started recognizing that you were the message all along. If something in this experience has whispered a truth you didn't know you needed, honor it. Breathe with it, then let it move through you. Leave a comment, not to be seen, but to speak from the place that has just remembered. Share this with someone who may be too lost right now to ask for a sign. Like this video, not because it's content, but because it's confirmation. And subscribe to Archemind, not as a viewer collecting ideas, but as a soul choosing to walk with others who have decided, we are not here to be safe. We are here to awaken. Welcome to what's been waiting for you all along.